Welcome to the Hang Time Podcast, season kickoff edition of the show. Sekou Smith here in Atlanta, my main man John Schumann in New Jersey for another interesting week in the NBA. Kicking it off here on the Hang Time Podcast. The regular season starts in a day. And what's an NBA regular season without John Schumann's Week 1 Power Rankings, which are live on NBA.com as we speak. Shu, it's a preseason ranking, obviously. So much of it is based on what teams, did last season, what they did in the offseason, and kind of where they project, just in terms of who will be what kicking off the season. No surprise, obviously, the Warriors at number 1 on your list. The top 10 is as follows. The Boston Celtics at number 2, Houston Rockets at number 3, Toronto Raptors at 4, the Utah Jazz, your favorite team, at 5, the Philadelphia 76ers at 6, the Milwaukee Bucks at 7, the Oklahoma City Thunder at 8, the Indiana Pacers at 9, and the Denver Nuggets at 10. I'm just going to go ahead now, Shu, and explain to Lakers fans, you are not as high on the Lakers as they are, and that's why they're not in your top 10. But beyond that,
they're close.
What's your big takeaway, though, from the initial rankings this year?
I mean, I don't know. I look back at my initial rankings last year, and I had the Indiana Pacers 26th. So that's just, I'm humble enough to know to tell you that I don't necessarily know what's going to happen with all 30 teams. But with some teams, the preseason made a sort of an impact on my thinking, and with some teams it didn't. The Celtics, I guess, would be the team where it didn't, where they really did not have a good preseason. Gordon Hayward did not play particularly well, and they got their butts kicked when he was on the floor. Yet, I still think, when it comes down to it, this is the second best team in the league. I thought Milwaukee was interesting. I think you can definitely see the changes that Mike Budenholzer is making with that team. And I saw, the Rockets are the king of taking shots either at the basket or from 3-point range. And the Bucks outdid them in the preseason in regard to the percentage of their shots that came from the restricted area or 3-point range. And that's interesting. They're shooting threes more. Obviously it's a coaching thing, but also a personnel thing, because they put some bigs around Giannis Antetokounmpo that can shoot, namely Brook Lopez and Ersan Ilyasova.
Right.
And they're playing sort of small in the backcourt with Bledsoe and Brogdon together. And I think it's going to be fascinating to watch this team sort of evolve under Budenholzer and try to make the most of the most talented dudes in the league.
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt. We talked nonstop about how much of a difference a guy like Mike Budenholzer can make on a team, just based on watching what he did when he joined Atlanta as their head coach. Is there any other situation around the league that you looked at and said this coach is going to change this team's, position, in terms of how they fit? Was there another coach you thought would have that kind of influence on a new team?
You know what?
I was thinking Steve Clifford, but I'm not sure. But
you're right. Yeah, I have the Magic Way at the bottom, and I do see some promise in as far as defensively. They've been playing Aaron Gordon back at the 3, and because they've stuck Jonathan Isaac in the starting lineup, so they're playing Gordon, Isaac, Vucevic across the front line, and so we'll see how that works out offensively. But defensively, it could be pretty good because that's a big front line, and Gordon and Isaac are mobile enough to defend the perimeter. And as I think we've noted it before, that when Clifford went to his first year in Charlotte, Bobcats, as they went from 30th to top 10 in defense. And so he can make that kind of an impact in Orlando. Not that Frank Vogel isn't a good defensive coach. Right. That could be huge. And maybe we've said it before, Vogel was a little bit handcuffed defensively by who his point guard was last year. And so we'll see. They have DJ Augustine starting at point guard, and he's small, so we'll see about that. The other new coach with Dwayne Casey in Detroit, I think he wants to make some changes there, but it's still about personnel and how well Reggie Jackson, Blake Griffin, Andre Drummond fit together. In the preseason, the minutes with Jackson and Griffin on the floor together were not good. They played 46 minutes together in the preseason, and which is almost as many minutes as they played in all of last season. So, but Detroit was outscored by 27 points in those 46 minutes. So that's not good, and it's going to be interesting. I mean, it's. I feel like with that team and the new coach, it's still more on the players to, one, figure things out, two, stay healthy, and three, play better than they have. You
bring up an interesting team in Detroit, and kind of where a group like that fits in power rankings going into a season. How do you, it doesn't matter, of course, where they are right now, because obviously there's going to be another power rankings at the end of the season that's much more important going into the playoffs. But how do you sort through and make these choices, Shu, just in terms of weighing positives against negatives in the data that you compile versus, sometimes the data doesn't always confirm what you might think of a team or where you think they might fit. How do you weigh those things?
That's a good question. I mean, I one thing I look, where did they stand last year? Are they bringing, and where are they in regards to continuity, as far as roster continuity? Not only looking at the record from last year, but also the point differential from last year. As I've explained with Utah, their point differential was much better than their record, and so I think of them a little bit differently than what their record said last year. And then, it's at this point in the season, I'm not as much as I use analytics to analyze teams and why they're good and why they're bad. I'm not a math projection guy where I take minutes and I'm not a Kevin Pelton type and who can project how players will perform based on history. Not only regarding those players, but also players of their age and their type. So for me, it's a feel, really. And then once the season starts, once we get some real data, then it becomes a little bit simpler to sort the teams out. Although at times there will be clusters between, in the Eastern Conference between teams 7 and 12, where you're not going to be able to figure something. It's just a matter of where they're trending, and sometimes it's a head-to-head thing. If two teams are close to each other and one team beat the other one within the last 10 days or so, then you give that team preference. But lots of times it's a feel, and sometimes I'll feel differently about a team one week than I did the week before, even though they haven't changed all that much. Milwaukee, like I told you, there is some data there, but I just feel stronger about them now than I did like in the middle of the summer when I was doing other rankings, especially in regard to them and Indiana. I saw Indiana as the clear number 4 in the East, but right now I feel like giving Milwaukee the edge, and there's nothing, I can't really point to anything specific with that. That's just a feel thing. And sometimes that's what it is, and sometimes there's a more clear delineation.
So, John, which team is the toughest to rank when you look around the entire league and say, I have no idea how this new player will impact this team, or I have no idea how this guy returning, whether or not he's going to make the leap that he needs to, make for this team to take another step. I mean, I'm thinking of like Philly and LA, the Lakers. Just how do you quantify Markelle Fultz and what he might do, or LeBron's impact and what that might mean for the Lakers? How do you come up with a way of crystallizing that for the purpose of power rankings?
Well, I think Philly, I certainly look at the way they finished last season, right? And 15 or 16 straight at the end of the regular season, and then, cruising through Miami in the first round. But then I feel like short term, they're going to take a step backward. And I think Brett Brown is acknowledging that with the lineup change that he made and putting Fultz in the starting lineup to bringing Redick off the bench. I think he's, playing the long game with that. And Fultz's preseason wasn't exactly a statement of, hey, you're definitely making the right move, putting me in the starting lineup. He didn't shoot many threes. He had as many turnovers as assists, and so it wasn't great. And so I did bump them down a spot, putting my Jazz above them.
Your Jazz.
In regard to where I sort of thought of them in the summer. But like I said, I think that's a long-term play, and I think that's sort of a short-term, let's wait and see with this team. And then the Lakers, I still think it's. I have no idea. I mean, for some reason, I put them between Denver and Portland in the West, and I just don't. LeBron barely played in the preseason, didn't play in the second half at all. Right. And they were good when he was on the floor,
Yeah.
but I still don't know how it's going to work defensively. And, you know, and with Denver and Portland, there's questions too.
Sure.
So, I mean, I think that whole Western Conference after Golden State, Houston, and Utah, I think there are tons of questions that can be asked.
Have you ever given any thought, and this is just something else, have you ever given any thought to doing the power rankings in those, you know, you talked about those groupings, like separating, just doing the top 10, the second 10, you know what I mean? Like, it almost seems like it would make more sense during the course. See, the same way teams break the season down into segments.
Group them into tiers, you know, like a tier 1 and tier 1 Warriors, tier 2, everybody else. No. I guess, I've thought about that. And I'll acknowledge it. Sometimes when in the writing, I'll say, okay, this is where, you know, or even like in the intro, like with power rankings, I'll definitely write, hey, there's a drop off between teams 4 and 5 in the rankings. I remember last year it was Golden State and Houston and Toronto and Boston as 1, 2, 3, 4. And then like the 5th team was always like, who the heck knows, basically last year. And I think it could be similar this year. I think though, like I said, Utah and Philadelphia are probably the favorites, but to be that other that 5th team. But like I said, like last year there was a clear top 4. And after that, it was, you know, flavor of the week, basically.
Sure. And by the way, I want to make sure everybody goes to NBA.com and checks out the power rankings. This John, excuse me, is why you fascinate me sometimes and then frighten me other times. And I'm going to read a small piece of your Lakers capsule. This is from the mind of John Schumann, people, just so you know. LeBron James, who has played 10,184 more minutes, regular season plus playoffs, than any other player over the last 15 seasons, played just 63 preseason minutes, none after halftime, with his new team. How in the hell did you look up or stumble across this 10,184 more minutes he's played regular season and playoffs than any other player over the last 15 seasons?
By the way, you know who number 2 is, right, in total minutes since the start of the 2003-04 season?
Oh, gosh.
We've talked about this before.
It's got to be Joe Johnson.
Johnson, correct.
Mr. Minutes.
Yeah, never. Has he ever been hurt? I'm not sure.
I don't think he's ever, been hurt or said more than 4 words in succession.
Yeah, when you never, accelerate, you probably don't get as hurt as much as guys who actually sprint hard.
No, that's brutal.
But but that's a stat I've looked at, a lot. I think I stumbled across it 4 or 5 years ago and always go back to it as a something to look at. And shout out to Stats Inc., who has the tool that lets me search that.
I just worry about you sometimes when I read one team one stat in your power.
But yeah, it's one, and I looked at his preseason minutes and, it was just 63 and it's like, oh, he barely played. And then, you got to acknowledge, well, hey, this dude has had the heaviest load of any player in the league by a wide freaking margin since he came into the league. And so that's why I cite that 10,184 more minutes than anybody else, which is basically 2.5 seasons, basically.
Right. I mean, which makes it even more remarkable that he's been able to play at the level he has, given all those minutes. The Lakers lead the second group of 10. We mentioned the top 10 earlier. The Lakers, Portland Trailblazers at 12. Interesting. The New Orleans Pelicans at 13, a team I think has a chance to move up depending on how they perform. Their preseason didn't inspire any confidence, I'm sure, going 0-5 in the preseason. But I still think if they get on the kind of skis that they were riding in the playoffs before the Warriors got their hands on them, that they could be a team that rises. San Antonio at 14. Is that unfamiliar territory for the Spurs?
Yeah, pretty much. I think they were in the 8 to 12 range most of the season last year, if I recall correctly.
Right. John Wall and Bradley Beal are looking for you. You got the Wizards at 15.
Show me something.
They're quite upset. They want to be. I'm sure they assume they should be in the top 5. Even though Dwight Howard missed all 5 games of the preseason, and I'm. That's somebody that I have to keep an eye on this issue. Dwight Howard and what he does if he impacts that team, if he's healthy enough to impact that team early on.
I think they're still like somewhat comfortable without him in a 10-man rotation that basically has Mahimi and Jason Smith playing center.
Right.
And I think they can play Markieff Morris with some some small ball center minutes too. So I think they're just going to keep moving on until he gets back, and then I think that it'll get really interesting when he does get back.
Yeah, the Minnesota Timberwolves, I'm assuming with Jimmy Butler in uniform to start the opener, for their opener and to start the season. I'm not talking about that anymore. I've decided I'm zipping my lips on Jimmy Butler.
You're going to be watching on Wednesday, though. You're going to be watching.
Of course I am. Me and everybody else. Well, I want to see if he scores scores on the other team's basket and then shouts at the bench. 17, the Miami Heat. Interesting spot for them. I think that's probably quite appropriate. Detroit Pistons at 18. The Hornets at 19. And the Cleveland Cavaliers. I was wondering where they would land on power rankings to start this season without the aforementioned LeBron James.
My note in the Cleveland thing I think is worth mentioning is that we're going to find out what this team is fairly early because they played 9 of their first 15 against Atlanta, Brooklyn, Charlotte, Chicago, Detroit, and Orlando. Those are all teams that if they are, say, 8 or 9 in the East, they should do fairly well in that first 15 games. But if things don't go well against that sort of schedule, then it's like, okay, this team has taken a huge, obviously it's taken a huge step backward, but it's not a competitive team, because 2 games against Detroit, like those are sort of, not statement games, but like those are measuring sticks, because that Detroit is what most people consider to be the favorite to take Cleveland's playoff spot, and then 2 games against Charlotte, same that's the same sort of tier, and then Atlanta, Brooklyn, Orlando, Chicago, those are teams they should beat if they are a team that's going to fight for a playoff spot. So I'm kind of interested to watch the Cavs in the first 15 games, like I said, just to see. We're going to find out pretty early what this team is.
Sure. I mean, and with Colin Sexton, a young point guard, there's always going to be some stumbles. So it'll be curious to see how they navigate that in what Tyronn Lue, point guard in this league himself, when he was playing, what kind of tutelage and mentorship program you have in place for a guy who's going to be an explosive player, but we don't know what kind of point guard he's going to be on a veteran team like that. The third tier is, since I'm putting them in tiers today, the Los Angeles Clippers at 21, the Memphis Grizzlies at 22. Shout out to Lang Whitaker. The Brooklyn Nets at 23. I thought you would be higher on the Nets than you are.
They're weird. I watched a couple of pieces of a few of their games, and there are some times where they look really good and sometimes where they just look bad. Right. And every player, like on their roster, you say, oh, that guy looks good at times and then looks not so good at other times. And Kenny Atkinson has some sorting out to do as far as his rotation, because they just have, we've said it before, just a ton of solid but not spectacular players on that roster, and figuring out who to play with who and who gets playing time and who doesn't is going to be a difficult task for him.
As long as Karis LeVert is in the rotation prominently, I don't care. Shout out to Michigan basketball. Dallas Mavericks at 24. I got to be honest, Shu, that is much lower than I was thinking they would be. I thought they would possibly be in the mid-teens.
Really? Why do you say that?
Just because Luka Doncic, baby. I'm telling you, this dude is going to be a star. I feel it.
Doncic and Dennis Smith together, plus 32 and 71 preseason minutes.
Just saying. I'm just telling you. I think people are sleeping on the Mavericks. I'm telling you right now.
And that doesn't include the game I think they played against one of the international teams. I forget which one.
Right. And I mean, they got DeAndre Jordan, so that'll be interesting to see how he fits and what kind of impact he makes. Chicago Bulls at 25. Obviously, Larry Markkinen, his, physical issues with the elbow sprain, he's out for quite some time to start the season. But they got Zach LaVine And Wendell Carter Jr., I think, is poised for, some big minutes as a rookie. And Jabari Parker, who we've gone over it. I'm very high on Jabari Parker in the Bulls uniform, while there are plenty of people who are not. It's all in the eye of the beholder. The Knicks at 26. I'm not even going to comment. Just Knicks at 26. Phoenix Suns at 27. And to me, this is more, as much as you celebrate who's ever at the top, you start focusing, you clean your glasses when you get to the bottom, because this is where you really want to look and say, all right, who's the caboose and why? Orlando at 28, Atlanta at 29, which I'm sure there's a sigh of relief being, going around the entire city of Atlanta. They didn't want to be last in the initial power rankings. Not with Trae Young hitting game winners in preseason games. They feel like they should be maybe higher than dead last. And Sacramento at 30, which I don't know how you could put anybody else in that spot based on what they've done. So I'm not knocking you, but is there any hope at all when you look at Harry Giles and Marvin Bagley III and, some of this young talent they have? I mean, is there light at the end of the power rankings tunnel at some point for the Sacramento Kings?
For sure. Those guys are talented. I mean, Giles, I thought looked solid, had some nice passes, which I didn't realize he had in him. He had a sweet catch and quick behind the back dime. I think it was to Bagley, and probably the best assist of the preseason.
Yeah. And
I liked what I saw from Bagley. He's got good hands. Like he'll snatch a pass out of the air. He's got I thought he had good footwork in some low post moments.
Yeah.
And a soft touch around the basket. I think he could do pretty well with a little bit of space inside of 15 feet. Right. So I like what I saw. It's just, they got their butts kicked. Like you look at preseason games and like the first quarters are when like you see the most real minutes, right? When
everybody's out there.
When there are actual rotation players on the floor most. Sometimes late second quarter, you get the third string. Fourth quarter, you get the third string. And, even third quarter, some guys don't even play the second half.
Right.
So in their last 3 first quarters against NBA competition, the Kings were outscored 110-48.
Okay, so maybe I shouldn't be worried about the latter.
It's preseason, but that's not good. Like, and their first game of the season is Wednesday against Utah, and Utah was up 45-10 early in the second quarter against the Kings the other day. So they get the honor of number 30 to start it. But I will say this now, and I'll say it probably 25 times during the season when we talk power rankings, is the rankings don't mean anything. It's just me putting teams in order. Sure. When I put this thing together, 99% of the work goes into talking about the teams, what's written about the teams, right. And then sort of 1% is putting them in some sort of order. Yeah. It's more it should be thought more of as like a notebook, thoughts from the numbers and from watching the games, more than the rankings themselves as being the primary purpose of it. So we went through the rankings and you asked me why certain teams are where, but sometimes it's just, like I said, 99% of the work goes into everything but their actual rankings themselves. So that's my, footnote for everything we talk about.
You can find the NBA.com Power Rankings on NBA.com every Monday. Make sure you check it out and pepper Shoe with all the same questions that I have. You can find him on Twitter. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not going to put you out there. The haters already know where to find you. The first couple of nights of this NBA regular season, Shoe, are showcase nights like always, but even more interesting to me this year. The opening night tip-off Tuesday on TNT, that doubleheader. The Sixers and the Celtics, and then the Thunder and the Warriors. The Warriors inviting, the schedule makers inviting the Thunder for ring night. Rub it in. I'm assuming that's to rub it in Russell Westbrook's face even more. I'm sure he's got to be there. He's going
to be there?
Because
do we know that
Cupcake's going to be over there getting another ring. So I'm sure the Warriors would have sent a private jet for him to make sure he's there. They don't want him to miss it.
Yeah, as far as we know at this point on Monday, we don't know if he's playing Tuesday night.
I saw him getting shots up on somebody had a video
in the air.
Getting shots up the other day on the practice floor, but I don't know what that means or what that, how that both for the Thunder this season. Obviously, we're watching these games and we're watching closely. The Sixers and the Celtics, for me, is important. You mentioned Gordon Hayward and his issues during preseason. I just want to see, more than anything, what the rotation looks like in Boston. How do you sort through those minutes if you're Brad Stevens? Who's on the floor together? If it's a close game, who's out there at the end of the game? What five-man combination do you have out there? What are you most excited to see on opening night?
I mean, I definitely think it's Sixers Celtics has some more intrigue than Thunder Warriors, just because of the Fultz, question. How is that going to work? I mean, he's putting in the starting lineup and he's going and that starting lineup is going to match up against maybe the most talented starting lineup 1 through 5 in the league in Irving, Hayward, Brown, Tatum, Horford. I mean, I can't wait to watch those 5 together, and I'm fascinated to see Fultz and where he fits in the Sixers lineup. Although I think Brett Brown is a guy who staggers the minutes of his starters quite a bit. So you might see the Sixers starters only together for the first 5 minutes of each half or so, but I still want to see Fultz and Simmons just in general play together. And whether either of those guys is sort of comfortable playing off the ball. And the Sixers are just fascinating from top to bottom. I want to see Embiid versus Horford again. I mean, that was a awesome matchup in the playoffs last year. And like you said, Hayward and just seeing where he's at, I think we've got to obviously be patient with him. He's explained his sort of frustration with where he's at and how he had sort of a minor setback that has kept, he thought right now he'd be ready to go.
The back issue, right? I mean, what I saw, he was talking kind of about, it was pain not necessarily associated with, his foot or his ankle, but,
right.
Maybe the rest of his body responding to being back in the mix like he has been.
Yeah, and then we'll see if the Celtics can sort of flip the switch from the way they've played collectively in the preseason. And, they've had a lot of days off. They're going to have like 9 days off between their last preseason game and Tuesday. So, time for a fresh
I feel like the playoffs teams, these teams that go so deep into the playoffs, they're so smart. They know that they know nobody's getting an award or a trophy for being up there, the best team in the preseason. They know better than to put too much of an emphasis on that in terms of wins and losses. Now, I love when these young teams and their coaches are like, well, we want to institute a culture of winning around here. So if that means we got to win a preseason game, we don't mind going undefeated in the preseason. Then they, a month into the season, they're dead last, in the standings, whatever. So I get putting your focus on that, but I also understand the good teams know better. They know that the real measure of the season comes much later than right now. But, having said that, when the schedule makers scoop up the stuff they give us early on, I love it because I want to see the marquee matchups. I love that the Rockets had to show up on ring night a couple years ago or last year, against the Warriors and then won the game. It was kind of a shot to start the season like, hey, we're coming for you. So I think after that initial back-to-back on opening night, you got a huge schedule on Wednesday. Thank God for League Pass, that we get a chance to watch as many of those games as you can because it's a show starting Wednesday. I mean, it's not like there's 3 or 4 games to slow play you into the season. After opening night, everybody's in action and everybody's on display. Who are you watching Wednesday? What snacks are you piling up for Wednesday night's all-night affair?
Well, of course, the Wolves are in San Antonio, and so that will be that will be the sort of popcorn game, I guess. Get your popcorn and see what Jimmy Butler does in San Antonio, but also, just to see the DeRozan-Aldridge dynamic down there and how they survive with a paper-thin sort of point guard rotation. I think New Orleans at Houston is an interesting test for the Pelicans, the sort of the new Pelicans team, and then I think Milwaukee at Charlotte. Like we've talked about, Milwaukee under the new Bucks basically under Bud, but also just to see the Hornets measuring up against that team and see where Charlotte is with their changes on the bench and in the rotation. So
a lot of basketball.
I think Charlotte's a little deeper than I thought. So especially with Miles Bridges,
he's looked great, by the way, in the preseason.
He had a Yeah, not just, all the tip dunks and all that, but also shot well from 3-point range.
Right.
And so that's a sort of I'm not surprised that Jeremy Lamb is their starter, but I am a little surprised that, Bridges is probably going to be in the rotation from day one.
Yeah. Well, there you have it. The first of a season-long series of Monday shows here on the Hang Time Podcast. We'll be talking about power rankings all season long, making Shu break it down for us after his power rankings get published on NBA.com every Monday. We'll also be here to, kind of talk about Wednesday night's action and look at the weekend on our regular Thursday Hang Time Podcast. So make sure you tune in. Appreciate it, Shu. Get a little bit of rest between now and Thursday morning. We got a lot to talk about. Be sure to subscribe to Hang Time on Apple Podcasts and Spotify for episodes Monday and Thursday all season long. Don't forget to leave a review. We'll see you next time right here on the Hang Time Podcast. On the Hang Time Podcast.